Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Our topic this week is mental health in the church. And my guests are husband and wife, Jim and Heather Sells. Jim is a psychologist and Heather Sells, a journalist at CBN News. Many people recognize her, I'm sure. And they recently wrote a book called Beyond the Clinical Hour, How Counselors Can Partner with the Church to Address the Mental Health Crisis. Jim and Heather Sells, thanks for being here. It's so great to be with you.
It's really fun to be here.
Thanks, Lori. Pleasure.
So you two are obviously very busy people with thriving careers, and this was a huge project. It took years to put together. Why was it so important to you to do this book?
It came to us through an invitation from an editor who worked for InterVarsity. He heard me give a lecture on this fascinating transition in mental health need and what role the church can play, and he just said, I would like a book prospectus, please. So it was nothing that we were pursuing. It just sort of grew organically from that conversation to then asking Amy Trout, another co-author whose expertise was in this area, and Heather, who's a storyteller, to work together at generating a description of what's going on in the church.
But I will say he was responding to a speech that you gave in which you were addressing a serious need.
Yeah.
Well, how prevalent are mental health problems, crises in the church? You know, we so often think, Christians are joyful and the peace of the Lord. And so a lot of people hear about mental health issues in secular society, but think a lot of folks in the church are doing great.
And they are. The church is a wonderful place for maturity to thrive and for people to form community. But the same presses on individual lives are also going to press on people regardless of their context. So in the church, in any community, you're going to see prevalence of all these different themes.
So what types of themes are we talking about? I know as a medical reporter, I do a lot of stories about the increasing number of people struggling with depression and sadly suicide as a result, and anxiety, OCD, addiction. What kind of mental health challenges are we seeing in the church?
All of them that we're seeing in the broader public. And there's no invulnerability because of our faith. Our faith gives us a language and an approach to address these themes that are going to be pressing on everyone. So all the issues of the mental health profession over the last 30 years have been increasing at an incredible rate. These are not COVID-caused issues. They were emerging decades before COVID in how we've tracked the increase in mental health in spite of really, really good advancement in medicine, advancement in empirically validated, like proven treatments.
Right.
We are growing in our ability, but our need is outpacing our ability to grow effective treatments.
It's just really so heartbreaking to see so many people struggling with mental health issues. And it seems to be growing, and a lot of people are asking why. But we did see, especially with the teenagers, but also adults, a huge spike once everyone started using smartphones, and then came COVID. Why do you think we're seeing so many challenges, mental health challenges in the church?
Well, we do know that phones are a part of it, and we're seeing more and more research come out right now that shows that when the majority of Americans did start using their phones, that's when especially youth started to have a real decline in their mental health overall well-being. So we know that phones are part of the picture. They're not all of the picture, but definitely they've contributed to this perfect storm that we're seeing.
And so then the question is, what do we do about it? Are folks in the church trying to hide? Because for a while their mental health issues were rather stigmatized in the church because we feel like we're supposed to be happy as Christians. Do you feel like people are sort of coming out of their shell and admitting and wanting to talk about their mental health issues?
We started this book in 2019, so just pre-COVID. And initially, we were seeing a lot more stigma. I do think that COVID helped somewhat with stigma. And now we are seeing more and more pastors, even themselves, who are struggling with their mental health, and they're talking about it from the pulpit. So that even just things like that are helping. We're seeing more and more people in the church, and especially even adolescents, 20-somethings, talking about their mental health issues. So it does seem that the stigma is not quite the issue that it used to be, but it's definitely still, for a lot of people, not something they want to wave a flag and say, this is me.
And this is something that we need to get out in the open, because as they say, the first step is admitting you have a problem. And so a lot of times people in the church will say, oh, you have a mental health issue, go see a professional for that. And that's sort of where the genesis of this book happens, because that's a lot harder than it sounds, right?
Right. The difficulty is finding a professional clinician, a psychologist, counselor, marriage and family therapist, social worker, who has space in their schedule, given that so many people have need. The waiting for services could be a month, 2 months, 3 months. So there's not a means by which a person that needs to be seen today can often receive treatment in the next even few weeks. So that prompted the thought of, is there another system that we can employ? That's the reason for the Beyond the Clinical Hour title. So therapists are incredibly inefficient at being able to address large numbers of people. An average psychologist or counselor will see about 200 people a year. Well, when there's 20 million people standing in line having need, you never get to the end of the line. So that was the prompting. The church has a capacity to attend to mental health concerns, not necessarily psychopathology, but instead of thinking about depression, thinking about just sadness. Or instead of anxiety disorder, people are really stressed and worried. And stress and worry is a common experience. We feel that every day, at work, at home, and to create the language and the relationship by which normal stress, normal discouragement, normal deep sadness, painful, but still within the realm of what everybody experiences. That's what the church can provide like no other facet in society.
This is really encouraging. This is something that I'm sure our viewers are saying, I really need that. So many people are sick. They know they're sick, but they don't know how to find a doctor or a mental health expert to help them. So to think that it can be in the church is really great. And, up until this point, especially in small churches, if folks had a personal problem, they would go to their pastor and schedule an appointment with their pastor. But that doesn't happen very often, right?
Well, the research shows, that people really do go to their pastors, and I think that's a good thing. That's a good starting point. And this book is really just encouraging, hey, the therapy hour, the clinical hour, meeting with your counselor is not the end-all, be-all. In fact, there's not enough counselors for everyone. So this book is really encouraging, hey, Christian counselors, how can you and churches come together and begin to collaborate and really meet the needs? Because people in churches want to meet the needs. That's a lot of the reason why they're there. And so it's like, how can you come alongside someone and sit with them and hear their pain and address it? And how can a Christian counselor help you with that so that people who cannot get in to see a counselor or who cannot see a counselor for their whole life can be supported by people in the church? So I think it's really a time for just thinking in real different ways about how do we address mental health. And it's not just in 50 minutes.
We don't want to convey the idea, oh, don't go see a counselor, go to your church. No, we want to convey the idea, counselor, think differently about how you go about your work. Instead of the 25 people you're going to see this week, think about, how can I effectively attend to 10,000 people? That means I need to collaborate with churches, providing for them consultation, providing for them training that they can do a great deal of this work on their own. I'm plenty busy. Let me spend some of my time dedicated towards helping you with the mass treatments that are needed for their culture.
Well, it's absolutely God's work. It couldn't be more timely. We're going to take a break and be right back with Heather and Jim Sells. The book is called Beyond the Clinical Hour, How Counselors Can Partner with the Church to Address the Mental Health Crisis. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're continuing our discussion with Jim and Heather Sells, authors of the book Beyond the Clinical Hour, How Counselors Can Partner with the Church to Address the Mental Health Crisis. And before the break, you were talking about ways to get professional counselors into the church, out of their clinical environments. And that seems sort of like a difficult task.
Yeah. We are trained to think of one-on-one, me and you, in this very private hour. But counselors, psychologists, mental health professionals also need to be prepared to think about, I'm a collaborator, I am a program consultant, I am an assessment evaluator, I am an idea generator to address the needs of my fuller community. We speak about like advocacy and our role within society as beyond just me and you in therapy, but me and you as part of I am part of us as a social change agent, and the church can become the big platform by which change can occur.
And that's some of the reporting in the book is talking about how this is already organically happening, where a rabbi will talk with a psychiatrist and get a few tips for someone in his synagogue, and that just slows down the pipeline so that person doesn't have to go to the clinical hour for their needs.
Oh, wonderful. So how does this actually work? Do pastors seek out professional counselors, or how does it work?
That's one of the tests of the book, is to encourage the active pursuit of those relationships. It's happening organically, as Heather just mentioned, and that was really her job in the book, is to look for those organic immersions of ideas that we can report and describe. We're needing to promote a sense of changing the way you do business. As in, I grew up in Southern California. The San Diego freeway was just a crowded freeway when I was there. So they've tripled in size. And now it's a crowded freeway. So the idea of thinking about another way of transporting people around Los Angeles is really what they have to think about, the same way with mental health care and the use of the church.
Right, yes. That's a great analogy. So for people who are interested, perhaps in their churches, maybe they're pastors, whoever might be watching the show right now, how can they get the ball rolling?
Yeah. We have been given this wonderful privilege. We, Regent University and Caris Institute, where I work, to think about, that's the idea, the book is the idea, now create an application. And we are creating the Church Cares initiative, and it's available at thechurchcares.com, all one word, The Church Cares. And in it is our efforts to build out resources to implement every church in every community, in every size, in every denomination. Andrew Carnegie said in the 1880s, if you have a person, a place, and a plan, I'll provide you a library. So to a church, if you have a person who's willing to be the recipient, and a place where this could happen, and a plan for how you're going to do it, we will be able to access and resource your church in providing all the needs necessary to develop your own program.
That's fantastic. So people can find their own resources. Are there any examples that you can give us of churches that are, and sort of tell us what it looks like?
We were just at a workshop for one of the churches that's in this pilot program, and they were training about 25 lay people in the church who want to be a part of this. So what it's going to look like is people can go on the church website and say, I'm sad, I'm anxious, I would like to talk with someone in the church. They can access that person online or in person. And these people are going to meet with them one-on-one for about 4 to 6 weeks, talk about why you're sad, what's going on, be good listeners, and then they're going to say at the end of it, hey, how can we resource you? Would you like to join a small group in the church? Would you like to join our grief share group? Would you like to be part of a Sunday school class? You know, and so funnel them into a community, and then that person, that helper, is ready for the next person. But people are not just left hanging at the end, they're being incorporated into the life of the church. So ultimately, the hope is that it'll be a win for the church and a win for pastors who will not have this long line out their door either.
Right.
Because we know a lot of pastors are struggling with burnout and feeling overwhelmed, especially post-pandemic. So that's the big picture.
This is great, because a lot of people in the church would love to help, their brothers and sisters who are struggling with mental health issues. So it's a wonderful marriage, if you will, and it's a fantastic idea. It's called thechurchcares.com.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're going to take another break and be right back with Jim and Heather Sells. The book is called Beyond the Clinical Hour: How Counselors Can Partner with the Church to Address the Mental Health Crisis. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we're talking with Jim and Heather Sells. The book is called Beyond the Clinical Hour, and we're talking about new ways. You both came up with some wonderful ways to help meet the growing need of the mental health problems in the church, but not really just in the church, in the community as well. And it's sort of like a new, modern, 21st century way to evangelize.
Yeah. People have need. Work on it, go. We have a pastor in our community here who said, I get a call every day from someone in my community saying, maybe my son or my daughter is addicted to opioids. What do I do? Maybe fill in the blank. What do I do? And this church has 150 members, and he said over the past 18 months, I've had 500 phone calls.
Wow.
So the idea of this is where you can go. We have a place to start here. Come. And the idea that this is where the love of Jesus is introduced is actually a very early church concept, as in Dionysius, the bishop of Alexandria, wrote in the mid 205th, the 3rd century, about 246. He wrote, during one of the plagues, Christians stayed, and they died. But those that were in the city were thinking, the Christians stayed for us.
Yes.
And that became the reason to be involved in the church at that point, because this is where they had their needs met.
That is such a great point. And not even that far back, but even here in the Tidewater, Virginia area in Norfolk, there was the yellow fever plague in the late 1800s. And the Christians were the ones that stayed and everyone left. And it was such a great testimony for being the hands and feet of Jesus. So you're right. This isn't really just for church people, right?
Yeah. In fact, one of the stories in the book is about a church in Oregon that was literally being called on by government authorities there saying, we don't know what to do with the waiting list that we have of mental health patients. We know that you offer biblical counseling. Could we refer people to you? So you actually had a case of government referring people to a church if they wanted, and then the church receiving these people, and these people who were newcomers to the church then being very interested in this church that was actually helping them.
It's a great outreach, and you're right. There's really, at this point in time, sadly, this is the hot button issue. This is where the need is in our country right now. So how are you trying to get the word out to churches and also to mental health professionals to get involved with this? You mentioned the one website, thechurchcares.com, and the book itself, Beyond the Clinical Hour. Is there some sort of outreach?
We are partnering with every organization, and there are many that share common values and interests and resources, and distributing what we can offer, what they have to offer that we can put up on our website. So the interest is in making connection with, literally, we have the potential to reach every church in terms of providing for them resources and thinking with them uniquely about how they can create ministry within their communities.
You know, Heather, you talked about the opioid addiction, and that's something that so many people want to get together and talk about. And we talk about depression, anxiety. What are some of the other mental health challenges that you visualize churches tackling?
Something you might not think about is veterans and first responders, and that's another story that we tell in the book. Is there is a group called Reboot Recovery, and they're meeting in churches, and they are there for people who are suffering from PTSD.
Wow.
And they are finding that just people are just flocking to them because they are years later still dealing with these issues and need community and need somewhere to go.
PTSD, yeah, that's a big one. All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Jim and Heather Sells. The book is called Beyond the Clinical Hour. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and we continue our discussion with Jim and Heather Sells. The book is called Beyond the Clinical Hour, and it's really wonderful to see how you're coming up with these very practical ideas to meet the needs of people struggling with mental health issues, and they are everywhere. We talked about PTSD and anxiety, depression, OCD, but surprisingly to many people, number one is loneliness.
Yeah. And that actually is the most powerful ingredient of care in all of those diagnoses that you mentioned. And I would fully encourage and recommend that anybody who is experiencing the intense trauma of mental health disorder to engage with a professional. But that relationship is one time a week versus what do you do the other 6 days and 23 hours on that day. So the idea that forming community and a place where you are known and can be known and can care for others, that is where most mental health interventions can take place at the most effective level.
It's very encouraging, and I just really want to commend you and thank you for this incredible work. I know it's going to bless a lot of people. Where can people find out more information about the book and the programs that you mentioned? How can they get involved?
Yeah, the book is available. It's published by InterVarsity Press. It's available at the InterVarsity Press website, also Amazon, any place that you purchase books. And our project is thechurchcares.com. That's how you can get information. You can contact me at jsells@regent.edu, and I'd be glad to interact with you as well around how your church can be involved.
All right, Heather, Jim Sells, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for joining in for this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week.